I really think he's come full circle in that I remember reading this interview in Hip Hop Connection with him years ago. And at the time, I totally disagreed with him. And now I've totally come around to his way of thinking. He says, you can't just pick and choose what hip hop. You've got to love all hip hop.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the Human Music Recommendation Service. My name is Liam Flanagan and I'll be your musical guide, recommending you the best in music wherever and whenever it came from. You're currently watching our interview series where each month I interview a guest curator. These curators know music inside out and we'll be discussing top quality recommendations in depth. Moving on to your next recommendation, and it's the Crimson Wing Mystery of Flamingos soundtrack by the Cinematic Orchestra. I didn't even know about this, and I'm a huge Cinematic Orchestra fan.
Aside from the fact it's Disney, which annoys me, it's a beautiful film and it's a beautiful soundtrack. And it's definitely, you can hear it's there. They've got a sound that falls into it, and it's an album you have to be in the right mood for as a listen to as an album. But you can listen to it as an album on its own.
It stands up on its own.
Yeah,
it's very emotional and evocative.
Yeah, absolutely. With the images as well, and with the film, it's brilliant. I think I could have picked a number of Cinematic Orchestra albums.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, it's pretty much kind of everything that they've done is great. I really like that they've done something a bit different with it.
And it ties in with you guys expanding out your own work and moving into scoring and doing these sort of audio walks. Things like that.
It definitely, or at the back of our minds somewhere has been this thing of we'd like to score film, being given the chance to do it. That's a difficult thing.
Yeah.
But they're a big inspiration for kind of stuff that we do in general. Although a lot of the stuff we do is very different, it's still there somewhere. That influence is still there somewhere. I think the thing I wanted to get across with some of these recommendations was because it would have been easy for me to pick stuff that's really simple and really similar to the stuff that we do. But I wanted to get across like how varied the kind of influences we have across the board eventually somehow finds its way into the kind of music we create.
I didn't pick up on this when the first album came out that this was an influence, but then when I listened again, and especially when I actually listened, I didn't know you'd put out an album. So
we did.
Actually, no, it's there in those, especially in the strings and stuff. I'm like, and the space, the way you use space, I think is not dissimilar to them and stuff. So
it's definitely there somewhere. And I think all these people are. I think that we've got
really good. Like it's very subtle.
Yeah,
especially that influence. But I think you guys are quite skilled at working this stuff in a way that doesn't slap the listener around the face first time.
Yeah, it's probably just chance, to be honest. It's probably not worked out or anything. But yeah, they're definitely in there. I think I just found that album really interesting that they've almost done this and then they've not done it again. Like they've been given this, and obviously I don't know how the logistics of it all, but we've done a soundtrack for a Disney film, which admittedly is a very subdued Disney film. It isn't. But it's still a huge corporation, and I think they've done this massive soundtrack, which by all accounts has been very successful in its own. But yet it's the one you kind of don't go to. It's the one you don't think of, which is great. Like it's great you've got like an album out there that's kind of sat doing that.
The next recommendation, which is Tape Music by the Mouse Outfit, who were someone I think I'd heard the name somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it's another hip hop thing, and by this point I probably wasn't as much into hip hop, but I was still quite into it, and I think it's still there, always remains there somewhere. The thing that gets me about this album is how northern it is, which really speaks to me.
That's something I picked up on,
which is brilliant because I've been a fan at some point of UK hip hop. I know there were little forays into kind of the north, but I think generally it was always a very southern thing and a very
London.
Yeah, very London thing. I think he had a couple of trips into Leeds, and it being so northern in terms of accents really speaks to me. I know there's artists in Hull that are doing hip hop, and I think it's great that you can do that with your own reference. So that was the main thing.
I definitely picked up. They're from Manchester, and you guys are from
Yeah,
Hull, and it's these guys rapping in their own accents. I don't mean this as a slight at all. It's very UK hip hop in its influences, like the
yeah,
rap influences and the dub influences, and
yeah,
that very dry production style that
yeah,
UK hip hop tends to have. In some ways, I guess that kind of ties in with the roots nicely. I think there's the odd exception in their catalogue, but for the most part, I think that Questlove is allergic to reverb.
yeah,
And that really makes them stand out because
yeah,
like it's such a thing with music, isn't it? Let's stick a reverb on that. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's very UK hip. It was a nice surprise. And again, as you say, rapping in their own accents. I can't think of anything really worse in music than people putting on phony American accents.
yeah. And I think it's gone that now. Probably that time has passed when people probably do rapping in it. The kind of level and the level of kind of success that they've had, which is still on a kind of relatively small scale in the grand scheme of things, but I think they've done pretty well for themselves with it. I
Yeah.
think that's quite a nice thing to see that because you look at Loyal Kana and you think I like Loyal Kana, but he's clearly from London, and I think it'd be
Yeah.
nice to see a northern hip hop kind of artist do something to that kind of level.
So your next recommendation was Apathetic Age by DJ Shadow.
One track drew me in, and that is the track which is called the same thing actually, with Sam Herring from Future Islands.
Oh, it's a fantastic voice, that guy.
When I first saw and heard Future Islands, he's just captivated by his performance visually, which I think like is a fascinating kind of way of the way he performs. But then also his voice, it's like a voice you shouldn't like, but you can't help but really like, and the difference in how he puts kind of his voice across, and this voice is coming out of this guy, and it's just
It
fascinating.
doesn't look right, does it?
It doesn't look right. It's
this white dude.
A few moments later.
His
the big
career
album.
definitely, for me, it took a trajectory where it was an amazing debut album that like everyone talks about, and quite rightly, it's amazing. And then the second album, it's still really good, but all the tracks are basically too long.
Yeah.
And too repetitive, and it feels like, DJ Shadow does prog rock, and then he does that third, The Outside. It's all right in places, and in fact, it has one of my favorite Shadow tracks on it. But outside of that, it's a bit like all over, a bit 50-50. And then he did that I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's called like The More You Feel or something. And that was terrible. But then these last few years, since the Amber Liquid EP in 2014, I just feel like he's incrementally getting better. He was trying to catch up with technology and get away from just being the MPC.
Yeah.
It just took him a long time to get there, because the stuff that he's made in the last 8 years is definitely a lot more geared towards sounds that you might associate with grime or UK bass music. Or it's a sort of more electronic end of hip hop. I really think he's come full circle in that I remember reading this interview in Hip Hop Connection with him years ago. And at the time, I totally disagreed with him. And now I've totally come around to his way of thinking. He says, you can't just pick and choose what hip hop. You've got to love all hip hop.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And he's right. But I really think that Shadow's now, he's traversed like this massive change over a long period of time. He's arrived at this different place. And he's as good as he was again. I'm not saying that Apathetic Age is as good as Introducing, but it's the closest he's come.
Yeah. I mean that track in particular that kind of drew me into it was, I just felt that it was just, the production of it was really amazing, and I think that kind of coupled with the kind of the vocals, and I think Sam Herring always seems to have this weird sense of regret in his voice. He just has this kind of weird thing of he
sounds like a very old soul, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like quite troubled. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the emotion I think he managed to put into every track, and I think that's what drew me in. Because the production, when it first starts, you almost think it's slightly slower than disco, but it's got a bit of a weird disco-y feel. It's the simplicity of the drums. It's just really well made. I think it's just really well put together. I think it's nice to hear him doing some kind of stuff that's interesting, and I think it is incredible. Some of the stuff that it always feels very emotional. It always feels very honest and heartfelt, and his voice is one of those, like, again, comes back to that thing of voices where, like, His voice is always really, it's so unique that it's just, you help being drawn in by it.
Yeah, 100%. Get that. Thank you all for watching this video. If you want to support Eclectic Selections and join our community, there are various ways that you can do that. Number one, you can like, comment and subscribe right here on YouTube. This helps our video get noticed by the YouTube algorithm, and it helps other music lovers like you find great music. You can, two, follow us over on Twitter. Here you'll get the latest news and you'll get extra recommendations. You'll be able to keep up to date with everything Eclectic Selections. You can join our Ko-fi, which is just like Patreon, so you can support us and you'll get access to extra content like private playlists with loads of recommendations, extra video recommendations from our guests, all that good stuff, and there's more coming in the future. Join our Discord community where you can chat with other music lovers and myself about music and other subjects too. All the links for all of that down in the description in our link tree. Thanks again for watching, and until next Thursday, keep it eclectic.